There is a moment in every legend's life where the spotlight becomes brighter than the person standing beneath it. For Tim Bergling, the young genius the world called Avicii, that moment arrived long before anyone realized he was drowning in it. Some people say fame killed him. Others blame the industry or the pressure or the loneliness that comes with success. But the truth, the real truth, is found in the years leading up to his final day. Years where his mind, his body and his spirit were quietly collapsing behind the music he gave to millions. Tonight, we open the file the world has never fully understood, the autopsy of Avicii. And part one begins long before the death certificate. It begins with the boy Tim. Tim Bergling entered the world on a cold Stockholm morning on September 8, 1989, a child born into a home filled with art, sound and quiet discipline. His mother, Anki Lidén, was one of Sweden's most respected actresses, praised across Europe and even recognized by the Golden Globes. His father, Klas, was a steady businessman with a calm presence that shaped Tim's soft-spoken personality. Inside that home were also three siblings. One of them, David, would unknowingly become a key figure in the tragedy that unfolded decades later. Every weekend, the Berglings played soul and blues, loud enough to fill every room. Tim absorbed those sounds the way other kids absorbed cartoons. No one knew it then, but those melodies were planting seeds deep inside him, seeds that would grow into the soundtrack of an entire generation. Tim wasn't a loud child. He wasn't a problem child. He was the kind who observed everything and said very little. At just 8 years old, he discovered something that changed everything, the ability to create music on his own. And by 16, when most teenagers were experimenting with their identities, Tim was experimenting with FL Studio, skipping classes to produce beats, harmonies, and little worlds made of sound. He uploaded them online under a name he chose almost at random, a word from Buddhist mythology representing the lowest level of the afterlife. Avicii. He didn't know how symbolic that choice would one day feel. Tim's life took a sharp turn when a soon-to-be manager named Arash Pournouri discovered him. Arash looked at this quiet, introverted teenager and said something almost unbelievable. "I can make you the biggest DJ in Sweden in 1 year." And somehow, he did. Seek bromance. Levels. The explosion was immediate. The world had no idea who the kid behind those songs was. But they danced anyway. They screamed his name. They filled arenas with energy he struggled to feel within himself. And the demand grew monstrous. Avicii, barely in his 20s, was now performing over 100 shows per year, a schedule that destroys even seasoned musicians twice his age. People saw the lights, they saw the lasers, they saw the smile. But behind every show was a body that was crumbling, and a mind that was begging him to slow down. In 2012, when Tim was just 22 years old, his body finally snapped. He was rushed to a hospital with acute pancreatitis, a serious and extremely painful inflammation, often caused by heavy alcohol use. Tim had never been a party animal. He was never the stereotypical reckless DJ. But with a schedule that demanded constant performing, traveling, and being on 24 hours a day, alcohol became a coping mechanism, one that spiraled. He spent 11 days in a New York hospital bed. Doctors begged him to rest. They warned him that his organs couldn't sustain the pace he was living. But after a few weeks, he was pushed back on stage. 2 years later, in 2014, the pain returned. Stronger. This time he needed emergency surgery to remove his appendix and his gallbladder. His weight was dropping, his energy was gone. His body was sending every alarm it could, but the machine kept moving. And to keep up with it, Tim began relying on opioids, prescription painkillers that numbed the agony long enough for him to smile in public and collapse in private. Not because he wanted to, but because he felt he had no choice. By the time Avicii reached global superstardom, the emotional cost was becoming impossible to hide. The documentary True Stories captured the cracks long before the public noticed them. Sleepless nights, non-stop meetings, anxiety attacks before shows. Moments where Tim cried from pure exhaustion. He was a sensitive soul, surviving in a machine that does not care for sensitive souls. He tried to explain it, quietly, honestly. I accumulated too much negative energy doing something I no longer wanted. By 2016, he finally broke. Tim announced he was retiring from touring forever. No more arenas, no more festivals, no more pretending he was built for the life people expected him to live. He told the world he was too introverted, too drained, too overwhelmed to continue. And for the first time in years, he could breathe. He traveled. He meditated for hours. He played piano again. He even began singing privately, something he had always been afraid to do. Friends say those months were the closest he had ever been to peace. By 2017, Tim released Avicii 01, an EP that revealed a new artist, softer, more vulnerable, more human. He began planning a future built on live instruments, real musicians, and music that came from the heart, not the machine. But peace is fragile, and the quiet moments he found were not enough to silence the battles happening inside him. He was calmer, but not healed. Which brings us to the final chapter before everything collapsed. On April 8th, 2018, Tim flew to Oman to visit friends connected to the royal family. He checked into the Muscat Hills resort, choosing one of the most private rooms on the property. Quiet, isolated, and protected. On April 9th, he held conference calls with his team about a new album planned for the next year, the project that would later become Tim. He took pictures with fans, he smiled, he seemed relaxed, but what the public saw was not what his closest friends were hearing. Behind closed doors, Tim wasn't eating, he wasn't sleeping, and during phone calls, he made dark existential comments that left people uneasy, especially his family. Then came April 19th, the day everything shifted. Tim called his brother, David. The content of the call remains private, protected by the family. But they revealed one thing. The tone terrified David. He bought a plane ticket immediately. He flew to Oman that same day, but he arrived too late. There is a moment, a precise moment, when a life filled with noise becomes painfully quiet. For Tim Bergling, that moment arrived in Oman, and everything that followed, the final day, the autopsy, the truth behind his death, would expose the weight he had carried alone for far too long. Part 2 begins inside the calm, sunlit halls of the Muscat Hills resort, hours before the world received the call that would change music forever. Tim had been in Oman for several days, surrounded by friends of the royal family. It was supposed to be peaceful, a break from expectations, deadlines, and the noise he could never seem to escape. From the outside, everything looked normal. He walked on the beach. He posed for photos with fans. He appeared relaxed, even happy. But appearances had never protected him before. Behind closed doors, according to people closest to him, he wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. He was making dark, existential comments during phone calls, remarks that hinted at emotional exhaustion far deeper than anyone realized. In the files you provided, one detail stands out more than any other. April 19th, the phone call. Tim called his brother, David. No transcript exists. No one outside the family knows exactly what was said. But the family later revealed the emotional tone of that call. It terrified him. Enough for David to book the next flight to Oman that same day, hoping to reach his younger brother before something irreversible happened. He didn't make it in time. The exact time of death has never been released publicly, but the files confirm the key points. Tim was found inside his private villa at the resort. Authorities were alerted immediately. Emergency personnel responded, but it was far too late. And in those first moments, investigators did what they always must do: secure the scene, evaluate the body, preserve every trace of evidence. They found no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, no indication that anyone else had been inside the room, and no injuries inconsistent with self-infliction. The environment was calm, undisturbed, and deeply, painfully quiet. Authorities in Oman performed 2 separate autopsies, an unusual but powerful confirmation that they wanted 0 doubts, 0 unanswered questions. Both examinations came to the same conclusion. Let me walk you through the exact findings, using only what appears in your files. Cause of death: severe blood loss, self-inflicted injury. The forensic report describes an injury caused by a shard of glass or a broken wine bottle. The files note that reports vary on which object it was, but the mechanism was the same. A single injury that led to rapid, catastrophic blood loss, exsanguination. This is not speculation. It is directly stated in the documents you uploaded. The wound was self-inflicted. There were no defensive wounds on his body, no bruises, no signs of restraint, no indication of outside involvement. The investigators were unequivocal. There was no crime, no third party, no foul play. Tim had been both the victim and the one who caused the fatal injury. It's important to understand what the autopsy did not reveal, because those details matter just as much. The examiners found no toxins suggesting overdose, no substances indicating foul play, no injuries inconsistent with a self-directed act, no abnormalities or marks on the room that suggested violence. Everything pointed to the same heartbreaking truth. Tim was alone, and he was suffering. This wasn't an impulsive act of anger. This wasn't the result of a sudden argument. This wasn't influenced by anyone else. It was the final moment of a long internal struggle. On April 26, 2018, the Bergling family released a public message confirming what investigators already knew. It is one of the most honest, vulnerable statements any family has ever made after a tragedy of this scale. They wrote, "He could not go on any longer. He wanted to find peace." Those 2 sentences reveal more than any medical document ever could. Tim was not seeking escape from fame. He was not trying to shock the world. He was not angry at anyone. He was exhausted, emotionally, physically, spiritually. His entire life had been a long conversation with pressure that his introverted, sensitive nature was never built to withstand. And in Oman, his mind reached the limit his body had reached years earlier. Shortly before his trip to Oman, Tim wrote what would become his final public reflection. A message posted on his website, meant to mark a new chapter. It now reads like a farewell letter he didn't realize he was writing. He said, "We all reach a point where we understand what matters most to us. For me, it's creating music." Then he added, "The end of live performances never meant the end of Avicii. I went back to where it all made sense, the studio. And finally, this is the beginning of something new." Those words were hopeful, they were sincere, and they were true at that moment. They reveal a young man still searching for meaning, still trying to anchor himself, still fighting to reconnect with the part of him that lived before the pain. But the battle inside him was larger than the world ever saw. And the autopsy only confirmed what his friends had sensed for years. He had been struggling in silence for far too long. Tim's body was returned to Sweden. His funeral, held on June 8th of that same year, was private. Only close friends and family allowed. No cameras, no spectacle, just grief and love and silence. Around the world, the tributes began almost instantly. Churches in Sweden replaced their bells with Avicii's melodies, letting his songs echo across cities the way he had once echoed across arenas. Fans gathered in Stockholm, dancing in the streets to celebrate his life, because grief, when mixed with music, creates something strangely beautiful. Artists across the world paid their respects, from DJs to pop stars to musicians who had never met him but had been shaped by his sound. And at the Friends Arena, thousands stood together as a full orchestra performed his songs exactly the way Tim had always dreamed they would be heard. Live, emotional, powerful, human. It was the tribute he deserved. Not as a DJ, not as a celebrity, but as Tim. Autopsies are clinical documents. They show the how. They never explain the why. The files you provided reveal every confirmed detail about Tim's final act. 2 autopsies. No foul play, a single self-inflicted injury. Death by massive blood loss. A quiet room, no signs of struggle, no one else involved. But the why is not found on a medical table. It is found in his life. The body that collapsed under endless touring. The mind pushed beyond its limits. The dependence on painkillers just to keep performing. The pressure of being a global superstar with the heart of a quiet, gentle introvert. The exhaustion that built up over years, not days. And the constant battle between who he was and who the world wanted him to be. Tim Bergling did not die because he was weak. He died because he was human. A sensitive soul living inside a machine that rewards noise and punishes silence. Tim's autopsy gave the world the facts, but his life gave the world the meaning. He was more than the tragedy that took him. He was more than the pressure he carried. He was more than the expectations placed upon him. He was a creator, a storyteller, a quiet genius who spoke through melodies when words weren't enough. And though his life ended far too soon, the music he left behind continues to vibrate through generations. Tim Bergling searched for peace his entire life. And in the end, I hope he finally found it. If you made it here, thank you for spending this time with me. Stories like this deserve to be told with honesty. And if you want more documentaries just like this one, take a second to subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think. And if this story moved you in any way, leave a like and tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Your support keeps this project alive. I'll see you in the next chapter.